Welcome to Awakening Your Path, the podcast where healing begins, truth emerges, and your authentic self is reclaimed. We're your hosts, Christy Godwin and Iris Libby, authors, spiritual guides, and fellow travelers on this journey of transformation. This podcast is inspired by our book, Awakening Your Path. If you're watching it on YouTube, you can see us holding up the book. It's a guide to navigating emotional triggers, transcending ego patterns, and stepping into a sacred process of becoming who you really are. And that is done through a list of questions called the process. Each week, we'll explore the raw, the real, and the radiant. My favorite, the radiant. How your triggers are actually invitations, how healing is not linear, and how your soul has always known the way home. Whether you're a seeker, a healer, or simply curious about the deeper layers of yourself, you're in the right place. Get ready to awaken, remember, and rise. Let's walk this path together. Welcome, welcome, Iris. How are you today?
I am good. And Christy, thank you so much for that lovely opening. You really
You.
tell what the book is about. And with that in mind, I want to know what inspired you to embark on
Mm.
writing Awakening Your Path. And was there a particular moment or experience that called you to share this work?
Well, first and foremost, I want to say that Iris Libby inspired me to write that for us to come up with this process, and so we'll get into that later. And later, on a time where Iris really triggered me, which is how we came up with these questions. But all my
True.
life, it's been really so important to me for people to feel accepted, for people to feel loved, for them to really be seen. That has always been from even when I was a teenager on up. I just noticed how many people were hurting, and it was so important to me to help heal them. In the process, I've done a lot of healing myself. And the more healing I did, and the more I worked with people, the more I realized that this world needs this work. It needs a way that people can, in an understandable way, release those triggers and start vibrating at who they are at a soul level. And if anyone's ever listened to me talk for any length of time, I truly believe who we are at a soul level is the unconditional love of God. Whether God is a word you use for that or creator, whatever your word is, I don't want us to get hung up on the name of who you call that higher power. And so we left the our path open to spirit working in the path. And this is what I think is so beautiful. And everyone watching, I want y'all to really hone in on this. If you don't listen to anything else I've said in this response, allow spirit to work in your life. It's
Mm.
in those moments that you feel like that you're really just being annoyed or that someone is purposely being mean, that if you get to a point of neutrality and look at your own behavior in that moment, it can really open up a whole new path for you. And that's how this book came about. How about you, Iris? What inspired you?
Well, first of all, what you said was beautiful, Christy. And
Except I threw you under the bus. I said, Iris Libby triggered me.
well, I triggered you, but really it started for me way before then because in 2012, I had an executive search firm and a friend called me and said, Iris, you're going to write a whole new system. And I go, a system? I go, I have an executive search firm. Why would I be writing a system? Although I've always been into metaphysics my whole life, from like a child. I was reading metaphysical books, and so I like dabbled a little bit, and I thought this is crazy. I'm not doing it. But then I met Christy, and all of a sudden, everything fell into place really when I met you. And I looked at her and said, I see us speaking in front of people together, in front of groups that about healing, and we've written a book. And then basically what we did was we met and started seeing what ideas came up. And actually, which we'll talk about later, this idea came up because I triggered Christy, which at the time I thought was quite funny.
It's true. And Iris said that we were going to be writing this book and speaking on stages and healing people. I think I didn't know her, and we had known each other, I don't know, half an hour, maybe an hour or something. It wasn't long.
Well, we'd met via Zoom before
Yes,
that.
but I
At
didn't really
one.
know you.
Yeah, no, you didn't
It
know
was
me.
like a business meeting. I didn't know
Yeah,
you.
yeah, it's
Yes.
true. And I look at her and tell her that, and she looks at me with these big saucer eyes, like, who are you?
Ladies off her rocker. All right. Now, Iris, how did your own personal journey with emotional triggers and healing influence the vision of this book?
So, I mean, I have spent years in psychotherapy and traditional talk therapy. And more than years, decades really. And I kept looping through the same emotional terrain. I was doing the work, I was showing up, I was digging into my past, but nothing ever felt resolved. Now, if you go to talk therapy and it works for you, that's great. Like I was very self-aware, yes, I was still just as reactive, although I could analyze every trigger, trace it back to what I thought was where it came from, and explain it perfectly. But I still couldn't stop it when it was happening, or stop like emotional, I'm going to call tidal waves when they were happening. And then I think it was in 2014, I had a past life regression session that changed everything. It showed me that healing didn't have to take years. And it didn't have to be about reliving the same pain over and over again. And that session gave me a sense of closure I'd never found in all the years of unpacking my trauma in therapy. It was so fast and it was so complete. And basically, I wasn't doing this past life regression to heal anything emotionally, or anything that was bothering me, but it just happened during the session. And it didn't require me to emotionally bleed out. Like many times I feel like I have to do work to be able to heal. No, it was like 4 hours, I was done. And that experience didn't make me question healing, it made me question psychotherapy. And again, if it's working for you, that's great. But
Mhm.
it made me realize that that model that I had been loyal to for so long and was so effective for so many other people was not working for me. So it put me on track to explore other approaches. And I did start to do that. I started to see that there were other ways to remove triggers, and I started to study other ways, ways that didn't re-traumatize me or require years of, I'm going to call it, excavation. And that was the beginning of what eventually became the process, which is a direct, compassionate, and immediately usable tool for moving through emotional activation without getting lost in it.
Very good. Thank you, Iris. I would say for me, the journey began just early on. I had a childhood when I came out of it. I knew that I was very prone to anger, and I was, having to control that. In my early 20s, I did go to therapy, and I was a little bit disappointed because, just went a few times, and all they wanted me to do was talk. And she was like, well, yeah, it seems like you've gotten a good grip on that. It seems, but no, I want these emotional upheavals in my body taken out. But
Exactly.
they didn't have a tool to do that. And that was in my early 20s. So through the years, I've done a lot of out external studying, doing hypnotherapy, NLP, and all kinds of different body works, the yoga, mantras, um, lots of meditation, which all those are helpful, yes. But I just had a vision And the more I worked with people and the more I realized that there were so many hurting people out there who are looking for something. And I never thought I would be blessed enough to be able to come up with a process to actually help them. So I feel so immensely grateful and blessed to even be a part of this, a process that has the potential to help millions of people. Now, when we started on this process, we used it on other people, and we do have to thank everyone that allowed us to guinea pig it, and it helped us really hone it down. And so, yes, that was my journey with emotional triggers, and it did create the vision of the book. But then, secondary, the vision of the book was about being able to deliver a book that was heavy enough that the educated and people that were really into, the healing arts would find interesting, but not so heavy. The people that weren't in the healing arts would be able to understand it. So those were the two components to mesh them together, my journey and then mine and Iris's journey of wanting something that was educational, but easy to understand.
So true, so true. So, when we first started writing together, what was the biggest challenge you faced and we faced in bringing our unique perspectives into one unified voice? Because we come from two different worlds.
We do. A lot of people will not understand how Iris and I are friends, and not because we don't have like goals. It's just because we are such totally different people. And there's a couple of components of this. It's for us to both be able to have our voice heard without overpowering the other. And also Iris and I we have both very distinct gifts. So that was very helpful. I'm a wordsmith like crazy. Iris has such beautiful attention to detail. And so meshing those two together just allowed us to create this beautiful product. You know, and I'm sure there are times where our egos have been involved, but we are good enough friends, and of course we did have to work our book. Just truth be told, everyone out there, the
It's
book on
true.
triggers, that one, the process, yeah, that one, we did have to work that a few times when working with each other. But you cannot be in partnership with another human being and expect there to never be a butting of heads or differences of opinions. It's about being able to work through the triggers of that moment to be able to see the beauty in what your partner is bringing to the table instead of looking through it through your trigger lens. So I would say the biggest challenge was making sure we stood in the vibration of love with each other. And then also, this wasn't really a challenge, but I do want to reiterate how important it is whenever you're working with a partner to understand what their superpower is and what they're great at, and make sure you're letting them do that part, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
It
So,
totally, totally makes
how about
sense.
you, Iris? What do you think the biggest
Well,
challenge was?
my biggest challenge was as we started to write the book, I broke my knee and split my tibuloplateau at Burning Man, which really put this book behind schedule a bit. And I do think it was a good thing because both of us stepped up into what we do
True.
the best. But when we were laying out the book and testing the book and removing the process questions and refining things, and there was never, like, as far as philosophy or
Mhm.
what we thought or the direction we were going in, we were 100% aligned. And whenever we weren't, we would test it in the market, which was
Yes.
so beautiful. And thank you. I'm going to thank everyone too who helped let us test our process on the market. And plus, we tested it on ourselves a lot. So I won't say I'm trigger free, but I have many less triggers than I did before. And I do think that, although our styles and who we are, is so different, that it came together in this really cohesive manner.
Absolutely. All right, Iris, here's a big one. Looking back, is there part of the book that surprised you and how it turned out? Maybe something that unfolded differently than what you had originally thought?
Yeah, I think it's the process itself. And what surprised me most was how easy and relatable it turned out to be. I've done some deep and layered work over the years, but I think part of me assumed the healing process would be more complex or maybe even heavier. But when we finally laid it out, it was simple. Now, I will say that while we were working, while we were coming up with this, Christy channeled my Aunt Ida, who I'm named after, and she said, we need to keep it simple. She was there at the beginning. And so Christy made up this little like sign that said, keep it simple. And every time, because I tend to overly complicate things, it would get complicated. Christy would point to the keep it simple sign, and I would take a cue from there. But so Christy, Aunt Ida's story, even though it's my aunt, is your story. Can you talk about like when she came in and what happened? Because it was amazing. I just want to
Yes.
say.
And please, if I leave anything out, interject because it was quite a long time ago, but it's so funny, everyone, how it starts is so funny. So we're there, we're getting ready. We have pieces of paper all over. We know we're here to develop something, but we don't really know what it is. And this we've
Wait,
been meeting
pieces
with.
of paper? We had full length sheets taped to every window, every wall. It wasn't pieces of paper, it was
True.
rolls of paper. Okay,
It's true.
go ahead.
It's true. So we're getting there, and all of a sudden, Iris says, we'll go to the bathroom. What? And she says it again. I was like, I don't need to go to the bathroom. She said, yes, you did. You just said, I need to go to the bathroom. No, I didn't, Iris. And so back and forth instantly, she said, then she caught on. She said, who is here? Because, anytime there's something happens, everyone turns to me and says, who is here? And so I was like, oh. And I started describing a spirit that was with us. And Iris said, that's my Aunt Ida. So then Aunt Ida was a huge kickoff for this book. She, like Iris said, was really talking about keeping it simple. She gave us an idea of what these questions might be. We didn't have the questions yet. That wasn't going to happen until I think the next day. But she had given us a broad idea of what they might be through me channeling her and Iris asking questions. And I will tell you that she probably gave us one of the best things was keep it simple.
Yep.
Because anytime we wanted to add questions to the original 10 or get more in depth in the book, because if you look at that book, really any chapter could be a book on its own. I just kept hearing Aunt Ida's voice in my head saying, keep it simple, keep it simple. It's like, that's right. People that are hurting and that want to heal, they don't want to read an encyclopedia. They want high level, give me what I need so I can process this trigger and move on. So. That was Aunt Ida's story. Do you have anything to add to that story, Iris?
So the funny part about it was I was convinced that
She
you had
was.
said, I have to go to the bathroom. I've been waiting all day. And I was like, just go.
Right.
It
The
was
bathroom
so
was like
fun.
5 feet from me. Just go.
Right. It was right there. And, Christy, I don't know if you remember later on, you had said to me that my Aunt Ida was trying to get my attention all day, but I'm in the middle of doing TikToks and social media and getting ready, like clearing things off my plate so that we could work on this, not knowing. And that's another thing. Many times you messages come in, but we're so busy in
Mhm.
the mundane world getting our stuff done that I missed that message. And she finally got through by, I heard, thought it was Christy saying, I have to go to the bathroom. The other thing I want to say is I really felt that at that point, because we had already identified what made you upset, and I thought was so funny. We're going to call it the door for now, the door, which made Christy so upset. But we hadn't figured out exactly what direction we were going to go in. And Aunt Ida kind of gave us like the beginnings of the
Yes.
roadmap.
Yes, she did.
And it's not it's my Aunt Ida in spirit, but really she was channeling a bigger source for us, which you had said later on.
Yeah. Yes, I did. I didn't want to, Aunt Ida was the one who kind of got our attention so that whenever I described the spirit, Iris would say, "Oh, that's Aunt Ida." Because if it had been, a bigger, a higher level spirit that we weren't familiar with, I probably wouldn't have channeled them that day. That's really not what we were there for. So I wasn't going to sidetrack us with bringing in a spirit because I have been known to do that. So
Yeah.
I wasn't going to do that day. All right, Iris, one of the core teachings of our book is the process. How
And
did
I
you?
want to ask you this question.
Oh,
How did
okay.
you come in to develop this method, and why did you feel it was essential to put it in the writing? Because I
Well,
really think it's a you question.
now that we've introduced Aunt Ida,
Hmm.
we were really trying to find a simple method to help hurting people.
Hmm.
Iris and I are always talking about that. We will help our clients just the best that we could, and we could tell that we felt like all the modalities that we had used in the past were kind of missing something. And this really came about through, again, I was triggered at Iris. So I don't want anyone to negate when they feel negative emotions coming up. Do not try to tap them down. Sit with those emotions and glean the meaning off of them because it was a negative emotion I was having in this moment that we sat with and we developed these questions from. And I thought it was so essential to put it in writing because I realized how just by following this method and asking myself these questions, I was able to quickly move to the other side of my annoyance in that situation. Because, truth be told, my annoyance with Iris had nothing to do with her. It was from a childhood trauma that she had triggered. And when we came through these questions and put them in writing, it was such a beautiful moment to see in a matter of minutes, I was able to release a pain that had been carrying with me for 40 something years. And I thought, if I can do this, if we can bring this to the masses, we have the ability to help millions of people help themselves heal. So now,
Remember
Iris, for you,
that moment. Yeah, I
yeah,
remember the moment. It was so beautiful when and by the way, the questions we had then have some of them are still the same, but like 75% of them have morphed through our work and working with other people. We fine tune them. But that day, it was so amazing how you went from really being angry with me. Again, I thought it was funny because it just seemed so, because she was angry about something that's like she knows about me and that she never got angry about before. Should I tell them?
yes, because I want to say also that being angry in general is pretty out of character for me. And so for me to be angry over this, what Iris is about to say was so ridiculous. I even myself realized the ridiculousness of it.
So, as a child, I lived in like this neighborhood that was very safe. My parents never locked the doors, never locked the windows, never locked anything. And I am this paranoid child. And they would go to sleep, and I would get up at night. I could remember being like 6 years old and going around and making sure all the doors were locked. And Christy and I have traveled before. We were in foreign countries, and there she didn't mind that I was always sure that all the doors were locked and everything was locked up. It's just something I do. And so we were staying at a friend's house who never locks her door. And for me, you know, I don't like that. So I locked the door, and Christy went to open the door, and she looked and said, "Who locked the door?" And I went, "I did." And she was really upset. She goes, "You're not supposed to lock the door. Like, this isn't our house. And I go, I know, Christy, but you know who I am. And I started to laugh. And she's a little like, Christy doesn't really get angry. She was like a little huffy, as we were going to work. So that is how this whole thing started. The book started with the door.
Yes, because I was angry at Iris, and the way I was looking at it was, who are you to lock a door in a house that's not yours and the homeowners don't want it locked? And so I was letting it go. But Spirit kept telling me, bring this up, bring it up. And I was arguing with Spirit, like, why would I bring this up? It's so ridiculous. I know I'm being ridiculous. I understand that. Why bring it up? And so when we got to the place where we were actually working for the day, I brought it up to Iris. I was like, I'm really still annoyed over that. And she's like, really? Well, let's explore it. So we did. And so, yes, our first explanation was, our first exploration of this process and me understanding this door was not nearly as fine-tuned as it is today, but it certainly kicked us off in that direction.
Yeah, totally. And it was like, when we look back at it now, it was a really magical time of
Mhm.
creating the process.
Yes, it was. Okay, Iris, how has teaching the process to others deepened your own understanding of emotional triggers and healing?
So, because we developed the material, I thought I knew the material, and I really do know the material. I've lived it, I wrote it with you, I've worked through it myself on many triggers, which I will share. But the first time I sat with someone and walked them through the process step by step, I realized just how much there is to learn. And what became really clear is that, like almost immediately, is that healing isn't linear, which I know intellectually, but experiencing it is something else. And it's definitely not one size fits all. People get stuck in completely different places. Some can't identify trigger. They'll say, I'm not triggered, because they're so used to powering through or disassociating that they don't even register the moment of activation. Others know they're triggered, but they're terrified to feel it. That alone feels dangerous for a lot of people. And so, sitting with people in those moments taught me how to slow down in a way and never to assume someone's process. It also held a mirror to my own blind spots, which was a big deal. So if I was triggered, like, I had to be honest, living with triggers is hard. I had to pause and say, "Oh, I'm triggered right now." So it made me like, I felt like, since we wrote the book, I have to walk the walk. So instead of
Right.
pretending I had it all together because we wrote the book, it made me practice what I preach without performative healing or bypassing the uncomfortable parts, which was a big thing for me. And the biggest shift is that I've become much more honest with myself. I'm faster at naming my triggers, not necessarily by name or with shame, but with curiosity. What's going on here? What's the root? And I've learned that the real work isn't about getting rid of the triggers forever. It's about how quickly and compassionately you can move through them when they show up. So it's really about love and compassion for yourself, which you always talk about, Christy. And so, looking back for you, what is the part that surprised you the most?
I was surprised for one thing. I am always and still am surprised at how many people have gone through some horrific things in their life and they're still willing to show up with compassion and love for others and themselves and still do the work.
Mm.
I have just been so amazed at and blessed by the beautiful people I've been able to work with in this arena. And teaching it, teaching it became was just a natural process because I have taught for 40, 30 something years, 20 years of the collegiate level. So teaching has always come naturally to me. And when I was teaching in the classroom at colleges, I always, I didn't, when I went to college myself, I didn't really appreciate professors who were, I know it all, you do not have an opinion.
Mm.
So you, from the beginning, I always, every semester I'd walk into that classroom, I would know, you know what? Let me learn what I can from my students this semester. The process has been no different. Every time I work with the process with someone, I ask Spirit, what can I learn in this moment? I don't even know if we have enough time for me to say, so I'll try to make it concise. Um, Courage, the amount of strength people have, the amount of compassion they have for each other, how we are frequently, though I know from working with myself, I can be my own worst critic, but everyone, we're so quick to give other people grace and mercy, but not as quick to give it to ourselves. So it's been beautiful to see people make that switch. Also, I do want to tell people, and outside of this book, if you are putting anything out in the world that is to bring people to a higher power, a higher energetic vibration, to help them heal, just be prepared that you yourself will be challenged.
Mm.
So have I always been, studying and trying to get rid of triggers and all of that? Yes, but since Iris and I wrote this book and have gone through, it's been almost a year of writing and editing and getting it published, the triggers have come really hard and heavy. And it's just Spirit's way of saying, hey, are you capable of walking your talk?
Mm. It's true.
So it has just been, we've just learned so, or I shouldn't say we, I have learned so much and how to hold space for others, how much people just walk in love and compassion on this planet. There's so much bad news out there and people behaving badly. But this process has allowed me to see people that are on this beautiful journey of healing and spirituality. And I've just been blessed to walk alongside them.
Mm, thank you, Christy. And, I want to add that teaching the process didn't just deepen my understanding of healing, but it also deepened my integrity inside the work, which was a big thing for me. So, Christy, what do you think is the biggest misconception people have about doing inner work? And how did we address that in the book?
Mhm, mhm. So on this one, Iris, I think that I have different back and forth on this. I think one of the big misconceptions is that healing has to be long, drawn out. You have to keep beating yourself up. It has to be painful. You have to sit with the same trigger for years and years and years. I'm not saying that it is ever easy to release triggers, especially if it's a big one, but it doesn't necessarily have to be painful. Something I do want to, I guess it's something I want people to be aware of is that once you release a trigger, you do sometimes feel a little lost because you have to think about this. Want everyone to put their thinking hat on. What used to drive you? That trigger used to drive you, whatever it was. Was it drama? Do you find yourself in drama all the time? Is it not trusting people because you've been shown that you can't trust people? There's so many things, but that trigger has really shaped your behavior. So
Mm.
once you release that trigger, then you're navigating the world in a different modality than you used to. So I think a misconception is that people think once you release the trigger, you're instantly going to be in a constant state of joy.
Mm.
It's a different state, and I do find it joyful. Absolutely. When second I release a trigger, I'm like, yes, that feels good. Some people will have problems and they'll feel a little bit stuck until they get their grounding under them. And that's when it's a great way to revisit the book on, different chapters that we really put the education behind. And that's why we wrote the book, so that people could say, oh my goodness, I released that trigger. Now I'm feeling a little bit stuck. What do I do now? You go back to the chapter that educates you on that. Don't give up on yourself. Everyone has just so much courage and strength in them. And don't think that healing has to be painful. Just show it for yourself. Now, what
Yeah.
do you think the biggest misconception is, Iris?
Well, I think that you have to do it perfectly, that you have to know all the answers, that healing should take a long time, that you need to suffer through it, that no pain, no gain. Whoever thought of that expression? Can you tell me? No pain, no gain?
That was
I don't
silly.
know. But, it doesn't have to be like that. Of course, there is, pain is an option and it's your option. I choose that option often, but, choose that option. So I think that people have to get it right immediately. I also think that this is something you can do at your own pace. And it's not something inner work takes the time that it takes. It's not like you can snap your finger and say, okay, today I'm going to do inner work and it's going to be done. It's a process. And I feel like people don't understand that it's a process. We've often heard the expression, of peeling layers of an onion. There's with the tears, there's always another
Mhm.
layer. It doesn't always have to be like that. It goes deeper, but it doesn't always have to be with the tears and the pain.
That is so true. Thank you, Iris. Now, if a reader is just starting their journey, how would you suggest them approach the process without feeling overwhelmed?
Okay. So I've thought a lot about this. And I've said some of these things already today, but you don't have to do the whole thing in one sitting. And you definitely don't have to heal your entire life in a weekend or even a
Right.
week or even
Right.
a
Yes.
month. Yes.
Yes.
You start gently. And I mean that. Start exactly where you are. You don't have to prepare to be where you are. Just be here now. And not where you think you should be. Like you don't have to come in perfect or fix yourself up. You just come in as you are. And the process was never meant to be some marathon of self improvement. We created it to meet you in the moment, right at the edge of whatever's coming up, and help you move through it without judgment, without pressure. So you can begin with one trigger, just one. Don't dig into your entire life story. Wait for something real, like when you feel that spike of anxiety, anger, shutdown, jealousy. There's many more out there. You can start there, then walk yourself through the steps. Now, the steps must be done in order, and that part is really important because the process has a structure for a reason. So you can't skip around or just say, I'm only going to answer questions 1, 5, and 9. Doesn't work like that because each step builds on the next. But here's the thing, just because the steps matter doesn't mean that you have to rush. You get to move at your own pace. So if you just do one question a day, that's okay. As long as you're honest, that's enough. I do think that once people start doing it, they go through them, but you don't have to say, I'm going to do this all today. You can I call it tricking myself. I'm going to go to the gym for 5 minutes and I end there up there for an hour. I
Right.
trick myself a lot. And let go of the idea that you have to be perfect because you won't. No one is. And especially not at this point. The point is learning how to stay with yourself when something hard comes up so you don't spiral or shut down or react in ways that keep you stuck. So we wrote the process to be something you can actually use in real life, real time. It's flexible, it's repeatable. And sometimes I have to let go of a process of a trigger several times because it'll come up in another way or in a deeper way until it's totally released. And that is human, you know. It's not about powering through your pain. I want to say that. It's about learning how to move with it slowly, honestly, and in a way that actually creates lasting change. And you will see the change. It's big. So, now that I've given my 2 cents, Christy, what about you? If a reader is just starting their journey, how would you suggest they approach and start?
I'm gonna take a cue from an Ida, and I'm gonna say keep it simple. You don't need a lot of words. You don't need a lot of explanation. I want everyone to remember that they are exactly where they are supposed to be. Wherever you are, however you are, show up.
Mm.
Do as much as you want or as little as you want. And by all means, have grace for yourself and have as much self-love as you would for your friend. And surround yourself in that and know that this is a journey. And if you want to partner with someone on this journey, you and a friend can work through the process together. Or you can visit our website, awakeningyourpath.com, and work with Iris or I. We are going to have workshops coming up if you want to delve in one of those. But visit our website, awakeningyourpath.com. There are ways to connect to other people. If you don't want it to be such a public way of connecting to other people, but you still want to partner with someone, grab a friend and y'all read the book together and work through the process together. But just show up for yourself. You are worth it.
Mm.
I want to thank everyone for joining us today on this part one introductory podcast of Iris and I talking about our beautiful work of love, Awakening Your Path, where we introduce the process. And our hope and our dream is that it helps y'all step closer to who you are at a soul level. Thank you so much for being here.
And I just want to say goodbye and thank you for joining us in this podcast today. And the book is available on Amazon.com. And Christy, can you show
I'm
the book?
just reaching for it. Here it is.
And
So this is Christy and Iris on the front. Christy's wearing the purple sweater and Iris is wearing the blue sweater.
it's a very easy read. It's
Yes.
not like it's a very easy, fast read, and it's very helpful. So we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.